Well, welcome everybody. Today is day one of this new project that I've decided to do. I've decided, well, a little background. So, this has been an interesting few months, obviously, not just for me, but for a lot of you. April, for a lot of different reasons, for me was possibly one of the most difficult months professionally and personally that I've had in a very long time. Uh, Possibly ever, but that's probably not true. Okay, in a very long time, shall we say. Yeah. And it meant that a lot of what I had planned for this month and for last month and for next month simply didn't happen for a variety of reasons. The most obvious one of which was just disruptions because of the coronavirus. But a hidden and unexpected benefit of it was that basically I had to face myself and decide what was the proper response to all of this because it became clear rather quickly that this isn't going to change all that much. The situation isn't going to change all that much. Also, it became evident that where we live in upstate New York, things were not all that disrupted, except for a few very key things, which I'm not going to talk about today. But basically, barring one or two major things, in the majority of one's life is pretty much going along in the same rhythm as it was before, except for such things like masks and stuff like that, which I'm not going to talk about today. But it meant that because the big difference, of course, was that we can't visit anybody, we can't go out, we can't go to cafes to work. And it turns out that I had become kind of dependent on leaving the house in order to get some of my work done. And I had fooled myself into believing that it was necessary for me to be somewhere else to get good work done. And it's an easy enough thing to say because I have three toddlers at the house and because we used to have events at the house, including homeschools and other things like this, where you'd have 15, 20 people at the house at a given time during the workday. So I would sometimes have to leave. There'd be no choice. Now, obviously, that's not happening. And it turned out that I was actually wasting a lot of time, as it turns out, moving from place to place and kind of warming up without actually sitting down and forcing myself to do the work. I've been reading Christine Catherine Rush's wonderful Freelancer's Guide, a highly recommended book. It's a big fat one. And I've been properly embarrassed by how badly I manage my time, or how I have managed my time. So I decided that over the last few weeks, I could use this time, and obviously it's not the most ideal time because distractions are abounding everywhere, not just in the house but outside the house as well. And the internet is certainly not a help to that. But it's a real training ground to be able to focus, to force yourself to focus in a way to kind of set a foundation for a good work rhythm for the near future. Because it's quite clear that nothing's really going to change in terms of the uncertainty for a very long time. So it's best, I think, if one takes this time to really set some ground rules for how one can do the work. And assuming, obviously, nothing really terrible happens over the next year or so, this, I think, could be really valuable for me, for you, for whoever, especially if you decide that working from home is something you want to do, or especially if working from home is something that you've been forced to do, even when it's not something that you've done before. So I found out for myself, and this is not a universal principle, I don't think, but I found out for myself that even though I use this wonderful tool, which is the Full Focus Planner, Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner, and according to this system, basically there's three big goals that you give yourself for each quarter, and you break it down to three goals for a week and then three goals for a day. What I found out is one major weakness of this system for me personally is that three big focuses per day is actually too much for me. And although I can do three major things in a day, what ended up happening is that I was psyching myself out in such a way that if I didn't do those three things in any given day, I just abandoned the day as having been an absolute disaster and basically having been useless. So I adjusted it a little bit, and I found that I can do a lot of work if in my own mind I've decided that only one of those three projects or one of those big three events per day is the one that's really important for the day. So that was a big shift for me. So instead of trying to do three things at once effectively and kind of focusing on three major things and trying to get all three things done, within a given quarter, I decided that I would take those three major events and rank them according to importance and according to time, so that instead of trying to finish all three at the same time, I would do all three in a given day, but I would put priorities on one of the three to finish it before all the rest. So what I did is that I had three major projects for this quarter that are all due basically at the end of this week, on May 15th. One is a revision of a translation project that I did last year, a big major one, and it's an important one because to do it right means further work for the same client in the future. The second one is also a freelance translation project that I was given last year that was supposed to be due at the end of December, but because of various things got bumped up to May. And then the third one, and the one that keeps getting bumped down to the bottom of the list, as it turns out, is book 5. Now, I've been writing book 5 slowly but steadily for the last 5 or 6 months on a regular basis. But because other things have been crowding it out, because other things have been urgent, it's been consistently pushed down to the point where, even though I set myself the goal of writing 10, 20,000 words a week, in some weeks I hadn't been doing more than 400 or 500. And it's not because I don't have the time or don't have the energy or don't have the desire. It turns out that for myself, as I found out, it's because I don't have enough mental focus to be able to look at more than one major project as something with a concrete and a discrete deadline at a time. So I decided to change the way I did it. And I did the first revision project. I finished it last week, and I'm just about finished with the translation project, which is number 2 of 3. And so that means that now I was left with book 5 as the only remaining major project for the rest of this quarter. And it came up directly against my self-imposed deadline of May 15th to hand in the manuscript of book 5 to my editor. Now, May 15th, the closer it got, the more it became obvious that that wasn't going to happen, that May 15th wasn't going to happen. However, my editor is a wonderful editor, and he agreed that he would edit my book piecemeal for me. So book 5, as it turns out, is actually a very structured, externally structured book with a very discrete and very specific kind of structural format. It's in 4 parts, and each of the 4 parts has the same arrangement of chapters and viewpoint characters. So actually, it makes perfect sense, and it's actually completely possible for me, especially with my writing process the way it is right now, for me to write part 1 and set it aside completely, knowing that the differences or the changes on it are most likely going to be cosmetic and not going to refer to major structural issues. So I did that. I sent him part 1, which meant that I had part 1 of 4. So it meant that I had 3/4 of the book left to do. Part 2 was mostly done. And so part 3 and 4 were planned, but not done at all. And I looked at the amount of words that I thought I would have left. And it struck me that I could do a kind of focused, intense sprint to get the book done properly. Because as it turns out, I work best not doing a little bit at a time every single day, but by doing a major project in a very compressed amount of time. That's how I've written all of the books, as it turns out. I've basically, the way my process of writing, and it's not a very good one, I need to work on making it a little bit better, but what it has been is me slowly tinkering away at the structure of the thing, or at the themes, or at part 1 for months at a time. And then when I really understand where the story is supposed to go, and when I get a sense of the characters' journeys, of their motivations, and the ending of the book, then I can, and if I have nothing else distracting me, I can sit down and churn out tens of thousands of pages, sometimes in a day. So I knew that this is possible. Also, the other thing that has been weighing on me is that I haven't been putting out nearly enough words, or not nearly enough words, for somebody who is serious about making this into a viable career. This is the reality of the current market, even the market as it has been disrupted by COVID. If you want the online retailers to pay attention to you, to actually start to offer your books to their own retailers like Amazon, the only real way you can do that is by offering them new books at a fairly regular pace. This doesn't mean that all of your readers are going to be reading really fast, but it does mean that Amazon will recognize you as being relevant. At which point, and of course I'm talking about Amazon but I mean it as a kind of catch-all for all of them. the different retailers work in different ways, but Amazon being the vast majority of my sales and most author sales, it's important to sort of gear most of my attention there in that direction. So that's what I decided to do. I decided that I would focus on making this sprint towards the end of book 5 a kind of training ground for my forthcoming output in terms of my writing for the next year and hopefully going on into the years after that. Meaning, I want to train myself to be able to write 4, 5, 6 hours a day, if that's what it takes. At this point, I'm working on getting 3 to 4 hours a day comfortably of good writing amounts. This means around 5,000 words a day. And that's what I'm aiming at. It's a 10-day sprint. I'm aiming at 5,000 words a day to finish by May 21st with 50,000 on average new words that added to the amount of stuff that I have now. It should be basically the whole novel. It could be more, it could be a little less. It's always difficult to predict exactly how many words it's going to be. And today is a good example of that because I came in really rearing to go. I got up early. I started my workday earlier than I normally do. I sat down and I had a fantastic first hour of writing work where in 45 minutes I did 1,350 words. Now, on average, most fast writers who don't dictate but who write on a computer do about 1,000 words an hour. And here in 45 minutes, I did more than that. So it was a good start, and I thought this is something I might be able to sustain. Problem is that I still have other work to do. So throughout the day, the way that my day was structured, it probably wasn't the best structure for a focused writing because what I ended up doing was I put in focused writing time from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. in the morning. And that was my first 1,350 words. Then I did admin from 11 to 11:30. I had lunch, had a break. Then I did translation from about 12:30 to roughly 2 o'clock or 2:30 or so. So that was a whole chunk of time that normally for me is throwaway time because I don't really work very well after lunch. Normally I get kind of into a midday lull. But because I have deadlines, I forced myself through it. Unfortunately, what that meant was by the time 3 o'clock came around, which was the time that I had set aside from 3 to 6 to do a really intense writing sprint and to try to get 4,000 words done in 3 hours, I was really tired. So for day one, I ended up not filling up the 5,000 that I wanted to. Part of that also, and this might be interesting for you guys who are writers, is that I needed to do some work on developing the motivation and the scene setting for one of my characters who is new to book 5, or rather, she is new as a viewpoint character. She shows up in book 4, but she doesn't have her own point of view. In this book, she does, and when that happens, I have to do a little bit of extra work to be able to really get into her head and to try to understand what it is that makes her motivated to do the things that she has to do. For those who are interested and who have read book 4, I've made Adelaida, who is the eldest daughter of Mirnian and Libya in the parallel world of Gavan in book 4, who shouldn't even really by all rights be alive because she wasn't actually the daughter of Mirnian and Libya. She was created within the fake parallel reality by effectively a demon. But at the end of book 4, spoiler alert, she's given the gift of life as almost a kind of surprise for everybody. And so in book 5, she's suddenly on the road with her family and on the warpath with the army, having lived her entire existence in a kind of fake, extremely sheltered world that didn't exist outside of a small island. And here suddenly she's marching out into war. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in her head. There's a lot of things that she needs to internalize. There's a lot of stuff that I need to figure out in terms of her motivation. I have a pretty clear idea of what I want to do with her as a character, but she's the one who's seeing everything that's happening outside of Vasilia. So her viewpoint is a very important one for the major thrust of one of the big plot lines in the novel. So I have to make sure I get it right in the planning stage. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing a lot of revision, and I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to get a clean manuscript done so that by the time I finish it, which is going to be hopefully May 21st, I will be able to give my editor something that's going to need just superficial fixing and not really deep story fixes. That's what I'm really hoping for. That's what I managed to do with book 3 and book 4. So that's the hope. book today, day one of the 10-day sprint went not as well as I had hoped. I managed to do 2,500 finished words. It was probably closer to 3,000. But in going back through some of the earlier chapters, I realized that there was a lot of purple prose, which is something that I do a lot in early drafts. So I ended up cutting probably around 500 words, unnecessary adjectives, adverbs, descriptive passages, clunky metaphors, awkward similes, things like this, to try to really firm up the writing and to make it flow a little bit better. So I ended up losing some words, but as a finished product for day one, considering I'm still heavily involved in the translation project that's due this Friday, and I'm kind of easing in easing into the writing sprint, so that the last 5 days of it are going to be the heavy duty ones. The first 5 are mainly there to create a rhythm. So in that sense, it was a really good day. It's probably one of the more prolific days that I've had over the last 3 or 4 months, even though it's only 2,500 words. That just shows you how difficult it's been to focus lately, and how many projects I've had working concurrently. But I feel enthusiastic and happy about what I've done, and I think that tomorrow we can easily get it up to 4,000 words and possibly even 5,000, depending on how the night goes and how the kids sleep, and other things like maintenance of energy and making sure that I drink a lot of water, that I eat well, and that I make sure to intersperse my long bursts of work with some physical exercise, which is really important. And that's made more complicated by the fact that it's snowing yet a freaking again. I cannot believe this weather. I'm done with it. It is helpful in the sense that it's keeping me inside so I can do more work. But anybody who works in front of a computer all day knows that if you're not able to go outside to breathe some fresh air, because the air is actually hurting you every time you breathe it in because it's so cold in May, yeah, it makes it for a slightly more complicated day than one would like. But this is part of what makes this creative life so exciting. So day one was good. I'm really excited about day two. I think we can increase the number of words. I have a good sense of where the story is going. It's even possible that I might be done with part 2 entirely by tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, which means I'll be done with half of the novel, and the second half is just going to be boom, boom, boom. There's not going to be a lot of exposition. It's going to be straight up insane action. There's going to be a lot of tense stuff going on, and for me, that sort of writing happens fast. So I'm excited about getting into the really nitty gritty stuff. And I just wanted to invite you all to keep coming every day. I'm going to be featuring this video both on YouTube live directly and on my Patreon page over at patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar. And just so you know, if you are not a member of my Patreon community, today I gave out a gift to all of my patrons who are at the $5 level and higher. And that gift is it's definitely exclusive, and it's the cheapest that I've ever given this particular gift. Meaning if you pay $5 this month, you will get a whole bunch of things, including my book club. But the big doozy is you're going to get books 1 through 3 of my Raven Sun series for free. So I gave that out to all of my $5 and up patrons today. If you haven't had a chance to read any of those books, you're not going to get them at that price point at $5 anywhere. They are $7.99 on Amazon and on other retailers. So if you want to just come in and check out what we do over at the Patreon, now's a good time, because you'll automatically get an extra special gift. It's already available, that post with the download link. So all you have to do is become a patron at the $5 level or higher, and you will see that link on the Patreon page, and you can download it at your own convenience. So that's all I wanted to say for today. Tomorrow, hopefully, we'll have a little bit more to say about the actual process of writing, and hopefully I will have more to say about successes in terms of superseding my goals for word count. So that's the big thing, because if we can get into a rhythm over the first 3 or 4 days, then I feel pretty confident that I'm going to be able to get this thing done pretty easily by day 10. So here's hoping day 1 is a success. And if you guys are interested in following me, just stop by at the same time tomorrow, 9 p.m., either at YouTube or on my Patreon page. And for me, that's it for today. And I will say goodnight. And there's my wife offering me something beautiful and warm to drink. So I will say Cheers to you all. Oh, it's chamomile with honey and ginger and lemons. This is the thing that keeps us all healthy in this house. So I wish you all health and good working time and calmness and um, peace in this time when we are forced to be with our own loved ones in much closer uh, quarters than perhaps we have been in a long time. Appreciate you all coming out, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.